Welcome, and thank you for coming out this afternoon to my mother's memorial tea. We're going to have the four Bryce boys sort of lead off with some tributes, but we will be opening up the floor later on for anybody who would also like to speak. And we encourage you to do so. Can you hear me in the back?
No.
Okay. You said checked. Checked. Well, you did hear the welcome, didn't you? Yeah. If the flowers are in the way of looking at our essence, please feel free to move the flowers to the side if you like. So we're going to start off with some tributes from the four Bryce boys. And Ian, let's volunteer to go first. There you go.
That didn't work.
You're on.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Welcome. As George mentioned, all four of us Bryce boys are going to be giving our take on our mother. And she'd be thrilled to see everyone who's here. She'd be very happy. I'm sure she is to know that you're all here in her honor. And we're very honored that you are here. We're all going to address slightly different facets of Mom's personality. And I'm going to speak just briefly, I hope, about her strength and her courage and strength in her family. And I'd start off just by mentioning Mom's love of the outdoors and how that's, her strength of her family and her love of the outdoors and how those are linked in her experiences. I'm going to tell you a story, and it's about our early days. This is a celebration of life. It's going to get a little sad here for a minute, but I guarantee it'll get better in a hurry. I came home from sports day at Queen Elizabeth Elementary on May 15, 1964, to learn that our father had died. To say it was a shock would be an understatement. And our world had crashed, and at that time, God only knows how that would have affected Mom. It must have been just beyond description. To be left widowed with four kids under 11. 4 kids under 11. And shortly after all the chaos and confusion and sadness, we had a little family meeting with a couple of folks from outside the family, and it was made very clear to us 4 boys that if we didn't pull together, then there was a good chance that some or all of us would be farmed out through the foster homes. That was the message we got early on, loud and clear. We were told that if we didn't pull together, then we may be farmed out. So pull together, we did. And with Mom at the lead, we learned very quickly how to run the house, how to do everything that needed to be done in the house, the garden work, everything, the shopping, and we also learned how to earn our own pocket money. If we wanted something other than the basic necessities, we needed to get a job and find jobs as 9 and 10-year-old kids. We did. Mom worked as a secretary in the Fine Arts Department at UBC after our dad's passing, and within a year or two, she had enrolled in the education faculty at UBC, working towards her teaching certificate. During this whole time, we didn't do this alone. We were surrounded by our extended family and friends, and it's only in retrospect that we understood how much our family and our friends supported Mom and us. And how much Mom benefited from their love and from their help and their kindness. With Mom as our guide, we gradually built our lives back. We got our lives back on track. Us boys turned to school, some more than others, sports and work. And Mom turned to her lifelong love of art and of creativity and the outdoors as her new foundation and her songs. And from these, she built a new life. Mom taught us by example. Every summer, she would load up the old Chevy 2. Mike, you'll remember this, Sean. Load up the old Chevy station wagon full of groceries and camping gear and kids from all over, and head out over the rutted and horrible, dusty, loggy road to the west coast, out of Port Alberni to Kingsley. This was long before this was a place. And we'd go out there, and we would drive onto Long Beach and drive miles down the beach and just pick a spot, wheel in, and set up a little rudimentary camp, and we'd stay there for days. Just camping in the drift above the high tide and surfing, boogie boarding out in the surf and that sort of thing. And Mom was always there encouraging us and showing us many, many other good things along the beach. She was an outdoor gal, and we became outdoor kids. Several years later, Mom bought my old pickup truck and camper, and that turned into an episode in her life. She took off for a number of summers. Some of you will remember that well. Often with a friend, and they would tour the province, into the Yukon, drawing and sketching as they went, and those were terrific times for Mom. And she wasn't afraid to try anything new. Sex roles weren't really a thing with Mom. She came up steelhead fishing with me a number of times when I was in my teens, and quite enjoyed it. And on a couple of occasions, she came out on my salmon trawler with me on the west coast in the spring. And I'm sure a few of you would know what that was about, but it wasn't exactly easy work. But she came out and put in a couple of salmon trips with me, and apparently enjoyed it. And later on, one of her other adventures, she joined Graham and Cicely and their kids and went trekking in Nepal, where she sketched and laid the foundation for a bunch of her works when she got home. So she had an adventuresome time with all those things. And through the years, as we all grew and started our own families, Mom's example and the example of our grandparents and our extended family led us to realize and value above all else the tremendous strength and importance of our friendships, of our families, and of our mom. She taught without instruction, and we learned without being aware of it that family is all that we really have, and that family is the sum total of all that is truly important in our lives. So thank you for leading us here today, Mom. We love you. We will always remember you, your strength, your kindness, your love, and your smile. Thank you, everyone.
We didn't really draw straws for next up. You?
Who's going to be faster?
Great.
Sure, I know. Who's going to be faster?
I'm number 3, Graham. And Ian's recollection is only close to accurate. You know, I definitely remember the family meeting in the living room with Mom and sitting around with a family member in which we were told, you know, you guys either have to get it together, you're going to be farmed out. But Ian was the only one who actually was. No, I can't remember which item he threw through the family television set when his hockey team lost. But I think it was a shoe or something perhaps heavier and more metallic. But shortly after that, I started hearing of how he wasn't actually going to school when he lived with Uncle Jim in Parksville. That mostly what he was doing was riding his Honda 50 up Englishman's River to go fishing. He didn't actually, and he really worked hard at not graduating, but eventually I think Mellis being in college allowed him to get the necessary credits to apply for law school. Wasn't that true, Ian?
No, for undergrad.
Undergrad. Pardon me.
That was a tough call there.
Anyway, I thought about what I was going to say here today, and I had a real hard time thinking about what I would do. I haven't done public speaking for well on 20 years now, for a reason you can understand. this is the 21st year post-stroke for me. So I thought I would change, I'd be creative as my mother would be, and just change convention by not sitting here making you hear me and listen, but by doing a bit more of a round room. So when you say round table, it's not usually laid out with a dozen tables, but I'm going to just pick a topic, and then each table is going to contribute a little bit. And I'm allowed to do this by executive privilege because I recently was elected to the executive of 3 different hearing organizations. So I know a lot about communication and hearing, and
Can't hear you.
and so I'm taking executive privilege with protocol here, and we're going to start. The first question is, so what made Mom Mom? What made Mary Mary? And I know you've got a booming voice with your first up. What made Mary Mary, James?
Her compassion.
Okay, her compassion. Where did she get it from?
Probably from dealing with you guys.
No. Allie and Jim were her source of much of her dominant characteristics. Allie was amazing, you know. She raised us. I was totally focused on the family. And that meant anybody, homeless, wayward, depression area, people who came to the door, they'd come in for a meal if Allie answered the door. And Jim, her dad, was a kind of a tough nut, military guy after, being a Vimy battle injured survivor. So he was injured during the Arras offensive leading up to Vimy Ridge. And then he was the commander of the Pacific Coast Militia Rangers, which was the military arm that was charged with defending this district during the Second World War. And so Mom, got her basic lessons from these 2 wonderful people. Her compassion and her kindness and her willingness to look at the unfortunate and help them out. But she also got something from her father. So as a preteen, when she walked into his general store, and there was a lovely new fishing rod on display, and she said, "I want that, Dad." And he said, "You can have it, just put the money on the counter." But she was pretty creative, and she was also a beach lover and knew all the beauty on the beach. So she started collecting oyster shells and sand dollars and painting them, and then selling them to the renters in their beach cabins. And every time a new renter moved in, they got inundated with, beach creations. And she went back up about a month later and put the money on the counter and said, "Give me the goddamn fishing rod." So, she got a good start in the getting good values in life from her parents. And so I think I've started the ball rolling, and now I'm going to take executive privilege and just go around the room. Jonathan, what made na-na-na?
Her calmness. And
What?
Once again. from
Her
you.
calmness.
Calmness, yeah.
Okay, she was...
From raising you guys.
Very patient person.
Yeah, exactly.
Patience.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we got calmness, patience, and
Compassion.
Maybe the other side.
Compassion?
Maybe ask.
Well, that's a good idea, huge. What made mom?
You're always picking on you. I think mom's willing to listen and give the person a chance to express themselves, and for her to form an opinion on that expression and really make a difference for people's lives by listening.
Yeah. She was not directive. I, as a child, and certainly as a young adult, do not remember her telling me what to do. I remember coming upstairs from smoking my first joint with a university student in the basement. And she looked at me and she said, "You know what's way better in brownies?" She didn't have to tell me to stay away from drugs in high school, even though we lived not far from Haight-Ashbury in the north in Vancouver. And mostly we stayed away from drugs and well, certainly I don't remember anybody getting into anything tougher than you could put in the end of a hash pipe. But you know, she's often given credit for raising four boys, pardon me, who did so well. And I like to counter, yeah, you know what? They all stayed out of jail because they didn't get caught for the bad stuff.
Smart.
Yeah. Anyway,
Can I volunteer something?
sure,
The-
Liz, volunteer.
From the daughters-in-law, I think she supported us without being obtrusive. That indirect nature, wouldn't you ladies say?
Well, you know, Liz, I remember a time when she didn't tell her sons what to do. But as soon as her daughters-in-law started having babies, they sure as hell got told what to do. Well, in our household, that became an issue that had to be settled with naming. We named one of our children, and Mom expressed some disapproval. I'm not going to say which, but and I said, "You know what, Mother? I never want to hear you say anything about that again, ever." And you know what? She never did. So she took direction from us from that point on. And I want to ask you
I was afraid, I thought you would.
about your memory of Mom and what you think made. I mean, I know she was one of your mom's best friends.
Yes. Yes, she was my mom's cousin.
Yeah.
And I found probably my best feel is that she was very, very warm and compassionate and could establish relationships very quickly. And I loved it when she touched my hands. It was magical. So that's like, I used to come over here sometimes and she would take me, we'd go do some new art project and that, but I was always so welcome. And I had been ill for a while, but I made it to her brother's funeral. And when she saw me, she took me away to the side, held my hands so tight, and said, "You have just made my day." And that one, well, you're at your brother's funeral.
Well, she
So that
loved
was lovely.
Thelma dearly.
And she always
And she
stayed
was very true to Thelma.
Yes.
She went to see her up at,
all the time.
where Thelma last lived at Pearson Hospital in Vancouver, and Mom went regularly to visit her, as did I,
Yeah.
in Thelma's later years.
Yes.
Irene, you can't hide behind anything. You are going to be called upon
Yes, I
to
can.
say
Oh, I don't have any
what you
problem.
think Mom made, or what made Mom Mom.
Well, I think, there's too many things to talk about. Not too many things, but there are so many. She was a very sharing person. So whether it's sharing her food, or her time, or her experiences, or the things she loved, She tried to give me art lessons one time. Hey, Judy. Judy was going to take art lessons from Auntie Mary, and I heard about it, and at the time I was open to different things. I said, yeah, can I join the class? Which I did, and it was such a great experience, just seeing Auntie Mary as a teacher, so patient, but knowledgeable, even with working with very unartsy personalities. Not yours.
Oh, no, all of us were very patient.
But and then she'd make it more interesting by taking us to the beach.
Yeah.
We'd take a picnic in the lawn chair, and we'd go to the beach and see things through her eyes with her suggestions.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was so influential to me, always open. I learned so much from her, and sometimes I wonder if she and Dad, one of them was adopted.
Hey, Sean, put away your goddamn cell phone. Sean is Pat Flynn's son, as is Mike. Are you asleep, Mike?
No, I'm trying to stay awake for sure.
And my mother actually went out with their father.
Here we go.
And so these guys,
Way to go.
these guys could be my fourth and fifth brother. But who bloody knows, eh? But I think I got carried away, so I'm going to hand the floor back to the MC and take my place.
Excuse me. I was told a long time ago when you're doing public speaking that look out in the crowd and give everybody in their underwear. I was nervous before I got up here. Now I'm really nervous. Mom was a wonderful woman. She really had so many great values, and we saw that opportunity for her every day we saw her. She was always outgoing and willing to spend time with you and to really make a difference in your life, which was lovely. One of Mom's good values, obviously good, but one of her strong values was her baking skills. Excuse me, the cookies here are a tribute to Mom. She was a really good cook and fed 4 hungry boys with whatever she could find in the pantry. Between fresh salmon that we caught locally and from meat from Uncle Jim's butcher shop, we did okay as a young, struggling family. Born in the Depression, she was not much into sweet things, and that carried on into her life. We've all experienced, from first-hand experience, Mom's dedication to a healthy lifestyle, substituting coconut milk or coconut butter for real butter, carrot chips for chocolate chips, and halving the amount of sugar in any recipe, creating some very interesting flavor combinations. One of her joys was baking bread, adding 12-grain cereal to sourdough bread, made for some really chewy and interesting flavors. I remember cutting off a slice of freshly baked bread on the counter, sticking it in the toaster, buttering it, putting jam on it, biting into it, and promptly breaking a molar on a grain of rock that came coming from the 12-grain cereal. We've all been blessed with dozens of Mom's cookies and other treats. Some are more digestible than others, and were often called edible failures. Christmas was a special time with the low sugar eat thrown out. I fondly remember coconut macaroons, sugar cookies, bird's nests, and the ever-present rum balls. And as a 10-year-old, I was limited to one. My all-time favorite, though, were her rough, tough cream puffs, which is a confection that she learned from her older brother, Jim. In a tray of these we put in front of us and reduced to crumbs in about 30 seconds, quite easily. Baking was one of her many skills, but she could whip up a batch of Grandma Golding's brown beans or a delicate fish dish with ease. Occasionally, one of her legendary edible failures would arrive at the kitchen table. And in one particular occasion, it was a wonderfully tall cheese souffle which looked incredible in the oven. And as soon as she brought it out of the oven, it collapsed like a card of a house of cards and turned into a cheese omelet. As a family, we never suffered for food. You can tell by my slim. And our love for cooking was installed by Mom. from us boys in an very early age. If one of us cooked, that means that she didn't have to. And I want to raise a cookie for Mom's honor. So here's a cookie in Mom's honor. Thank you very much. I don't have much more to say. I'm going to say a few words, and then I'll be reading some tributes from some friends who were unable to be here today. And then after that, the floor is open. Have your speeches ready. I'm going to speak about one of Mom's greatest passions, and that was her art. And we, of course, see examples of that around us today. And we've had a chance to walk around and look at some of the tables. But art was incredibly important to Mum throughout her life. As Graham referred to, as a young girl making beach art, which she, of course, entrepreneurially sold to get what she really wanted, a fishing rod, all the way through to when she was a resident at the Garden and was making, I guess we'll call it seniors art. But for her, art was a way to explore and enjoy the world, a way to experience it. And she often referred to herself as a form of therapy for her. And she had many, throughout her life, challenges where being able to reflect and get into her art was very important for her, and I think really helped keep her sane. And especially with having 4 boys around the house, she was often in her sanctuary looking for a bit of calmness. Mom had many influences and took courses from some very important artists. And she also learned art and enjoyed art by sharing experiences and going out in the wilderness with friends. And some of them are here today. There's Joy, Judy, Arlene, thank you, and a few who would like to be here were it not for circumstances relating to COVID. Mom also really enjoyed going to galleries. When she traveled, when she'd go to a different city, and I remember talking to her about some of her travels and saying, you know, that's really an important thing when you go to a city, go to its gallery and get a feel for that community by looking at its collections of art. And I have always found that to be a wonderful thing to do when you go traveling, is to go to a local gallery. As Graham mentioned, Mum worked as a secretary in the Fine Arts Department at UBC shortly after our father's death in 1964. And she became good friends with several of the staff there, one of whom was Tony Onley. And if any of you have any Tony Onley on your walls, you're lucky. And I remember meeting Tony as well when I was a young man, when I also went to the UBC Fine Arts Department, and he was a very interesting character. My mother's relationship with him, as she documents in her book, extended into the more personal side of things because they both had lost partners early in their lives. But Tony was one of her good friends from those days. Mom also took art classes when she had the time. She did night school at UBC. She went to the Banff School of Fine Arts and later the Victoria College of Art. And for a few years in the 1960s, Mum shared a studio space in a wonderful little building called the Vancouver Sun Tower down on West Pender. And she and a group of artists that she had befriended, especially at the Banff School of Fine Arts, had gathered together and rented half a floor of this grand old building. And because the name, the group of 7 had already been taken, they called themselves the group of several. And they produced some fantastic art. I remember going down there as a teenager and just being amazed at the variety of things that this group of
several were producing. Art was always around the house when we were growing up in Point Grey. Paintings were hanging on our walls. Mom had found out that you could borrow art from the Vancouver Art Gallery. I think it was free. It was just incredible to think about. And you could take a painting back for a month, put it up on your wall, and then exchange it out a month later. And my brothers and I would be quite amazed at all the different artists that would suddenly appear in our living room or in our dining room. And that was a wonderful experience. Art also entered our childhood in different ways. And one of the things one of my strongest memories of my mother was her evening soirees, where she would have the friends from the fine arts department, boarders from our basement, boarders from the room, the house next door, other friends would gather at our house on a Friday or a Saturday, and we'd make crazy pizzas, as I call it. Basically, you sort of throw everything that was in the fridge, and you put it out on the kitchen counter, and you just make these pizzas. And people would be very creative at what they would put on top of pizzas. There'd be copious amounts of wine or beer consumed, and what I recall in particular were many engaging conversations on all sorts of topics that we would have with these basically university students. And this was when we were in our early teens to late teens. And it was wonderful. I have very strong memories of that, those evenings. Sometimes there'd be music, sometimes somebody would play guitar, but the one consistently strong theme for all of these evenings was our mother as the consummate hostess. And I just remember, you sort of step out of yourself of being a teenager with the mother, and you go, she's actually kind of cool. She's really handling all these situations really well. So that was one of my first experiences of actually seeing my mother in a way that didn't really make her my mother. It was more like, who is this woman? She's got quite amazing talents. And she did have that strength, that capacity to interact with people, to engage them, to make them feel comfortable, to ask them even a simple question, to make them feel comfortable and enjoy the time under our roof. And yes, we had a few strays. Graham, as you mentioned, had a few strays would suddenly appear, as we call them. People who she had maybe met through something at the university, but they were always welcome around our dining table. Now, we brought a few extra copies of Mum's art book from there to here, and they're available at the back for any of you who haven't yet had a chance to get your own physical copy. Reflecting on that book, I wanted to thank Raiden for her great skill in putting it together. Her graphic artist's graphic skills were put to good use in putting that book together. Now I'm going to end my tribute by quoting from my mother from the last paragraph in her introduction. Art is about having faith in oneself while adventuring out into the unknown. The unknown doesn't necessarily have to be the great outdoors. It's just something that you have not yet experienced. I think that's really a strong message that all of us boys have taken from our mother. Thanks for showing us that path, Mom. Now, I've printed out some tributes and words of condolences that people had sent in. Were posted up around the wall of the hall here. But I also have a few tributes that friends asked me to read, so I'll do so after having a drink of water. The first one is from Barry Munn, and Barry was, I think, the first student we had live in our basement suite after my father passed away, and we needed an additional source of revenue. Barry's been a long time friend of our families. As a matter of fact, we sometimes refer to him as the fifth Rice brother, which is a compliment. Anyways, this is from Barry. I don't think I ever really worked out whether Mary was the big sister I never had or a surrogate mother who stumbled upon this young orphan way back in 1964. I guess I prefer to see her as a sister, someone who supported and encouraged me, who showed me how to live in a large family, and who cosseted me as one of her own kin. She would have made a good mother for me as well, with none of the combative natures of my own mother. Ready to guide, to open up new pathways, and to introduce me to the wonders of the West Coast. She was always gentle, never stern or critical. I never saw her angry. She knew how to deliver an edge if it came wrapped in velvet. Her generosity in that house on West 12th was stellar. At moment of tense turmoil in her own life, she included me in family meals, sent me off in her Chevy 2 to explore Vancouver Island, and drew all my friends into her social circle. She gave advice in a way that made it sound not like advice at all this in a comfy apartment in the basement for $50 a month. She then welcomed Nancy into her fan club. For years, we devoured her lovingly illustrated, handwritten Christmas cards and letters in our homes in the East. And she did a better job of staying in touch than perhaps we did. She always made us feel that we mattered, and the same welcome mat was extended from my parents, for my parents, our friends from Europe, and our own children. Nancy remembers with particular affection her visits to the house after my cancer diagnosis. This is Barry speaking. If we happened not to be home, she left a plastic bag of homemade bread or cookies hanging on the front door. In our last few years of visits with her, she always asked after Brendan and Rhiannon and their children. Mary opened our eyes to a sense of nature, an appreciation for the ocean, the beach, the forest, the rivers, and the mountains. She even managed to get me sketching, setting me up with a pencil, eraser, and a small sketchbook. I still have them, but make painfully slow progress. And of course, we have our own artwork scattered around our home to remind us of her on a daily basis. Her book sits on the table in the middle of our living room. And then to cap it all, she shared with us the Bryce Kingsley clan, from Grandpa Kingsley through to Jim and Ruby and their family in the Ladner house, the 4 boys and their families who are solid anchors in our lives, and the various grandchildren and now great-grandchildren. Mary has been a very special lady to us, and we should never forget the gift of her friendship. Our world is that much smaller without her, and we miss her gentle smile. This tribute is from Barry Hart, who I remember very distinctly as a teenager when he came to our house. He ended up sleeping under our ping pong table. And I'll tell you why. I first met Mary in the summer of 1966 at the Banff School of Fine Arts. I left Northern Ontario in February of that year in a Morris Mini with 140,000 miles on it, somehow thinking that a car with 10-inch wheels was the best way to cross Canada to Vancouver in the middle of the winter. It got me as far as Calgary and eventually a job. I decided to take some time off to go to Banff, that summer to do some painting. I met two Vancouverites there, Mary and Ted Rashley, at a course at the Banff School of Fine Arts. I eventually arrived in Vancouver in a new car on a Saturday in mid-October and called Mary. I was invited for dinner and she gave me a place to crash under said ping pong table. At dinner, I met her 4 boys and a former tenant by the name of Barry Munn, who immediately invited me to go hiking up Black Tusk Meadows with he, Judy, Jill the next day. We finished the day at a Hungarian restaurant. In one day, I had acquired an entire extended family. Later, when my car needed some work, Mary sent me to Ted Dash. And there, a young mechanic by the name of Gary York, remember Gary? Who now lives in Ladner and is still servicing my car to this day. It was probably the next year that Mary invited Jill and I to do Thanksgiving at her brother's place in Ladner. My first introduction to the town there that has now been home for me for 50 years. I remember Jill commenting as we came out of the tunnel and turned onto River Road, how much it looked like Holland. My wife, whose name is also Mary, and I have been kept in touch with Mary over the years, looking forward to her keeping us up to date on how the boys were doing, and to her Christmas cards, either handmade or reproductions of her paintings. That chance encounter in Banff many, many years ago became an extended network of friends and has endured over the years. Cheers, Mary. We will miss you. The last tribute comes from a friend of ours she married a good friend of mine from high school, as it turned out. Her name is Yardana Venner. Your mom was a role model for me and a woman who was active both mentally and physically for many years beyond her retirement from teaching. She was kind to me when I was new to BC and lacking in any kind of mother here. She was always so honest and forthright. She was a breath of fresh air. I admired her decisiveness and her independence, and she gave me good counsel. Your mother will always be a special memory for me. She was warm, friendly, gracious, and wise. She took me on hikes when I visited her. She fed me well, and she always made me feel so welcome in her home. She even let me bring her friends sometimes. One of the strays. She was always interested in what people were doing and the direction their lives were taking. She was beyond supportive. Mary was blessed with the 4 of you and your families and many years of good health. I understand what suffering gracefully with dementia means. My mother did as well. But it just deepens your bond during those last precious years. My most sincere condolences. You have a wonderful mother. That's your name. So we've reached the end of the sort of formal part of the tributes, and the family would be pleased. I'm sure we'd all be pleased. If any of you would like to say something in addition. Arlene?
When we were talking about all the strengths Mary had, I thought one of them was her adventurousness. I remember the time that she decided she got herself a Toyota truck, a nice little Toyota truck, quite new, and she decided that she was going to drive up to the Yukon alone. So, I mean, in those years, that was pretty adventurous. Anyway, I'm going to read mine because otherwise I might forget something that I want to include. I met Mary in 1972 when my colleague Dorothy Booth approached me to join with her and renting a suite from a friend in Vancouver. Dorothy and I were attending summer school at UBC. Mary was our landlady, and a charming one she was. A couple of years later, she called me to join her in an outing. She was now living in Nanaimo with her sons Ian and Hugh. She was teaching at Nanaimo Senior Secondary, and we found a lot in common as our subjects were very similar. When I moved from Nanaimo to Lanceville to live at Dorothy's house, we became a frequent threesome. After Hugh graduated, Mary soon retired from teaching and eventually moved to Victoria. She called my mother, who lived there, who visited her in her new digs, and reported that she found Mary a warm, delightful person and a fine cook, but was doubtful that her new abode would be satisfactory when winter came. I remember apparently she had to walk outdoors into some kind of an outdoor washroom, so it was a little less than ideal. That fall, Mary found an apartment in Fairfield and reported her that it suited her exactly and that she felt so rich. I had a new appreciation of how extra special Mary was. In the following spring, she visited my mother several times in the hospital. After Mom passed, I visited Victoria less frequently, but now I spent the occasional weekend with Mary in her apartment. She always had interesting and novel ideas for our adventures, like lectures at the museum or foreign films at UVic. In 1977, I bought a Datsun truck and found a camper to fit. Mary and I had many adventures. We camped to Gabriola, Fetus, Denman, and Hornby, where we reveled in the funkiness of their community hall and hiked their scenic Helliwell Park. On another trip, we camped our way to Port McNeill, where we kissed the pavement after enduring the jolting ride from Seward. This was before the highway was paved. We got to Port Alice and Winter Harbor, where we indulged in delicious seafood. Some years later, Mary moved to Qualicum Beach and finally back to Parksville, her hometown. Comfortably ensconced in her own patio home, Mary pursued her many interests and I think delved into her art with renewed enthusiasm. In June 1993, she and I set off in Don's Toyota truck and camper to the Kootenays, a journey we both enjoyed a lot. She had just lost her mom and found the holiday a release from the sadness that had surrounded her. Mary cooked our meals, a luxury I appreciated since I always did the driving. In the spring of '97, we got to Pemberton, only to find an avalanche and close the Duffy Lake Road. Mary suggested that we take a helicopter ride over the mountains west of Pemberton, provided another memorable adventure. In 1998, I needed surgery on my spinal cord area, and that would be at Vancouver General. Mary, the dear woman, arranged for Dawn and me to stay at her son Graham's house. Mary came with us and visited me post-surgery, but had to leave to be with her sister-in-law, Ruby, who had a serious health issue. Dawn stayed on for the full week. I was at VGH, faithfully visiting every day. We were so very grateful to Graham, Cicely, and especially to Mary, who had done the usual Kingsley thing of helping wherever she could. What a dear and precious friend. In our later years, as my mobility decreased, our activities became more sedentary. We got together almost every week, and in the last years when Mary was able, we had picnics in the park. Mary would so enjoy being in Little Qualicum Falls or Englishman River Park for our lunch, to which we both contributed. I remember my last visit to her in the gardens. I saw a picture of Graham, Cicely, and their 3 girls. And I said, which is which of those girls, I asked. Mary couldn't answer, and I realized her mind wasn't what it was. That fall, I had vision problems and couldn't drive any distance, and COVID happened not long after, so I could only phone. Finally, there was never an answer when I called. I learned from Ian how things were and felt very sad. I have treasured from there to here, and through it I have a new appreciation of how much Mary's art meant to her. and the solace it provided. I always enjoyed her paintings and the variety of styles she cried out. She gave me her cards as gifts, and I bought many more, and the recipients have always told me how precious they are. When I look over Mary's pictures, though, I go back to the portrait of her with her family and think, these outstanding men, her sons, and their brilliant families are her finest achievement. Thank you, Mary, for bringing these fine people into our world and for being the extra special friend we always were.
But on behalf of the whole family, I want to thank you for coming out this afternoon. And we have one last, ready to go? We have one last event, this afternoon's memorial tea. Maggie's going to sing a special song.
That we end with a bit of music, and this song in particular I thought was quite fitting. If any of you are familiar with the song "Let It Be" by the Beatles, it was written by Paul McCartney, and it just so happens that he wrote this song in the 70s, shortly after his mother passed away. And he had a dream about her, and she came to him in his dreams, and when he was experiencing some anxiety or having some problems, and she said, "Let it be," and those were kind of like the words. Her name also happened to be Mary, which is why the song says, "Mother Mary comes to me." And I think this is very also fitting, just in the way that my Nana was, in her, calmness and reassurance and general positivity, even when life kind of threw hardballs at her time to time. So. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. And though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. I wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be. baby.